micromobility. We're going to discuss how to build your tech stack with specific reference for mopeds, how you do that, some kind of challenges come up, how to navigate that. Quick introductions. I'm at Invers. I work with Invers. We do IoT. We work on the infrastructure behind that, so we have really reliable telematics. We've been doing it since '93, so that's over a quarter of a century now, which, as you know, is literally forever in the sharing world. I work with operators all the time. We try to create successful, scalable projects, and I do that by connecting them with software partners, charging infrastructure, city planners, hopefully Invers hardware, whatever is going to give them a really successful project. So that's my background. On to Enrico. Really excited to have you here, Rico. He spent an incredible amount of time researching moped operations worldwide. So when he gives you guys an example, it's actually based on numbers and it's a nonpartisan view. So I think that's really valuable. Rico, take it away.
Thanks, Chris. Hi, everybody. I'm really flattered actually to be here today, despite the fact that it's actually Friday evening back in Berlin here. So, but it's seriously really good to talk to you again, Chris, and really flattered to be here. I think I've been researching and consulting the moped sharing market like itself with a lot of focus since 2014. I'm the founder of MopedSharing.com, a knowledge platform for moped sharing research content. And this is featuring, as Luke said earlier, like annual state of the industry report, background white papers, consulting content, stuff like this. And to put it in a nutshell, like moped sharing is kind of my natural habitat. So this is what I do like 90% of my time. So thanks for having me here today, Chris.
Absolutely. So yeah, to get right into it, sharing mobility is extremely dynamic right now. Something that is the right solution for your project today could easily be obsolete by next year. So charging infrastructure is something that's been brought up a lot during this conference. Last year, lots of solutions used juicers, but let's say next year you want to do a charging solution. Feel free to jump in chat here. I know Swift Mile and Commute and Park End. I saw Joyride actually just announced a new station. So feel free to jump in chat if you guys are in here. Parking is another big topic right now. How we're parking the vehicles, what the city's allowing, if we're taking away cars, etc. Over the next half hour, we're going to discuss building your tech stack in such a way that you have the flexibility to meet these new demands in a changing environment. Please ask questions. Please chat. I'd love it if this was a bit of a discussion. We got to power through because we don't have too much time, but anything we miss will be in the booth. There's an Invers booth later, and we're going to put it together in a blog. So anything that's up on the board, we're going to address. Rico and I exist outside of this, so please jump on, say hello on LinkedIn. Feel free to jump in, like we said, say hi. We'll put some links and stuff up at the end of the chat. So Rico, why don't you start us off by explaining why mopeds are relevant right now, Lime, and we'll start there.
That's a good question. I think that's also the main question since like moped sharing has been in the shadows for quite a while. Looking at it from the outside, let's start like this. The market exploded in the past 2 years. We can see that on the left graph, which you just put up here. We recently crossed the 100,000 moped threshold, which is quite a big benchmark for the industry for the very first time. And just like in the last 2 years, the market like quadrupled. So we see like 4 times the market size than we did in the middle of 2018, which has been quite a very strong development. On the other hand, what's like really important for this session here today is what we can see on the right graph. There's like more and more cities running moped sharing operations. And moreover, there are like approximately 20 new operators per year joining the market. Many more actually try to enter the market, but they do not for several reasons. I think that is why today's topic is so relevant. Of course, COVID, Luke said that in the beginning, is like really relevant still. It hit the industry pretty hard. As other mobility sectors, as society in general, but it becomes more and more obvious to me that shared micromobility is actually coming out of the crisis as a winner. And that's really important here. I think Amanda will also share a white paper from Invers and Flick 2 in the chat that I helped putting together with you guys, and it shows some evidence from Europe exactly on that first COVID wave. the baseline of that paper is that shared mobility has been quite resilient. That's really important here to underline, to emphasize. And that actually, Chris, wasn't clear back in the heat of the first COVID wave. And I think that's really important to understand here.
Absolutely. So, I mean, obviously, the COVID's affected everything worldwide. Those are some really good points about that in general. And how about like North America? Like we've seen, like obviously, Revel's a great player out here, and Lime thinks it is. Hopefully, that works. That'd be fantastic. But otherwise, it hasn't really taken off in North America. Do you have any thoughts on why that may or may not have happened?
Yeah, North America is pretty special in the market. That's true. So I ran some numbers just before the show here. There are only 6% of the global moped sharing fleet, which is actually situated in North America. And that's primarily US market. So there's no operator in Canada. There's only 2 smaller ones in Mexico. So it's an American market. However, the market was actually born in the US. And that's really interesting, actually, from a development perspective. San Francisco has been, let's say, the cradle of moped sharing. Scoot Networks paved quite some ground there back in 2012. That's how old the market is now, 8 years, 8.5. And there were like some amazing people around, Michael Keating and team. Let's look a little bit to what's happening today. So Revel dominates the market, like in New York City, in San Francisco and area and stuff like this. So, but just like this Wednesday, as you said, Lime announced that they will also entering the moped game in March in DC, in Paris. So if you ask me personally, I'll expect North America to become really, really relevant in the coming years. What's important though is that the American market is not like the European market, and the European market is the equivalent of 80% of the global moped sharing market. That needs to be understood here. What's different is that there's a different mobility culture. There is in Europe awareness of moped as an option, and there are less dense city centers in the US. So that makes quite a difference. I think finally, and that might be a point we're talking about multiple times today, is the transit orientation here in the US. I think it's less transit oriented, as everybody knows. So vehicle ownership therefore plays naturally a larger role. And I think that's quite a major difference.
So as you were talking, there's a lot of questions come up. So I'm going to take us off the rails really quick. Do you, off the top of your head, know the demographic differences between kick scooters versus e-bikes, specifically male, female? If not, we'll just jump on this answer for you guys later in the blog, like I said. But Enrico, do you know them off the top of your head, just for the chat?
I mean, like the user side is pretty interesting. It's mainly 25 to 34 years old. Like this is pretty similar to kick scooter sharing and moped sharing. They're all very much alike. When it comes to the gender registration ratio, this is pretty interesting because like there's a strong bias. This bias looks pretty much like 3 out of 4 users are male. And this is a very strong dominance. And however, we can see there's a little bit of a shift towards more female registration and usage in the sector, but still, this is a pretty strong bias.
Awesome. We'll try to get some more answers, like actual numbers for you guys here later. We just don't know them off the top of your head. So to move on here, there's 3 real components you're looking at in your tech stack. The first one is going to be your vehicle, the actual IoT that connects it. So let's say that there's 2 things you can look at. First of all is the vehicle type. So pretend you've got a Super 73 and it's fantastic and you're doing tons of sharing, but you think, oh man, Janelle made a really good pitch and I want an active scooter. How do we add kick scooters to our e-bike kind of situation? Does your hardware allow you to have the flexibility to do both of those things, or is that going to stop you somehow? And then next is, what can the IoT at the vehicle actually do? Does it have connections for the new things that are going to be coming out? Think way back to when we started in Europe, and they have a fantastic cell phone system, and then we bring it over to North America, it's maybe 95, 96%, so you got to add Bluetooth. So what's your flexibility to adding Bluetooth, and how's that going to change your model? Were you ready for it when you started? Next kind of thing you want to touch on is the fleet management, right? Keeping your fleet efficiently utilized is really key to profitability. So sheer volume seemed like a great idea, and then San Francisco got massively littered with kick scooters. I know I talked to Tony Howe at Segway, and Eric Wang of Wind mentioned that the littering problem is not the solution. What you really want to be able to do is have good analytics and good procedures that are going to allow you to efficiently utilize only enough scooters, right? So what do these new analytics look for? Or is your fleet management software ready to adapt to figuring that out? Finally, you've got your booking software, like what the apps, right? This is how you make your brand, like how you differentiate it. But at this point, now you're looking at how do you customize it. So you have the option of going with a software provider who is going to probably have multiple, like dozens of different projects under their belt. They're going to have, everybody's going to be asking for kind of the same thing. And then you're going to get a solution from them that's really well experienced and has a lot of vehicles behind making the decision to do what's actually needed. But maybe that's not what you wanted, or maybe that's not what's right for your project. So the question again coming in here is, say, do you want to do like what Rebel just did recently, is build your entire software framework yourself, so you have that customization and that flexibility. Mm-hmm. But then obviously that's a significant amount of effort. So with these examples, Enrico, back to you here. We got so many examples of what you could possibly do. How do you go about making a decision? And just for fun, why don't you start with maybe some bad choices where people didn't end up with flexibility?
That's a lot of questions. Yeah, please stop me if I'm talking too long on that one. I think we're already half through the workshop here. I think one of the things you should do, I think maybe we start with that one, is focus on future growth. Most often operators, they just look what's happening today, but like future growth, that's what you should look at. Let's say your business is becoming mature, successful, you want to scale, right? You want to go beyond to second city, increase your fleet size. Cityscoot, for example, in Paris has 4,000 mopeds in a single city. That's 4% of the global moped sharing fleet in one city by just one operator. So what I'm basically saying is expect to grow beyond. You better want to have a reliable solution. That's really important here. I think the second point, Chris, is often there's no focus on integrating with other shared modes. Moped sharing is not a standalone solution. It never has been. Neither is kick scooter sharing and so on. Think of it as a system, including shared bikes, kick scooters, cars, but most importantly, once again, transit. I think that's really important here. Finally, I think another aspect is you want to stay flexible. You do not want to have lock-in effects. You do not know what's coming up next. Seriously, nobody saw COVID coming. Now we're talking about long-term rental, subscription services, hygienic measures, right? So all these things have not been foreseen. So you better be flexible in rethinking your business model and be flexible to change. Make sure that your tech stack enables that. That's pretty important.
Yeah.
And you wanted to have the fun, right? So maybe two examples. Reliability. So there's some operators in the early days of the industry, when it was raining, like the tech stack was basically shutting down the IoT. So it can be as simple as that. Of course, early days of the industry, but reliability matters. And second of all, not taking into account future business model adaptations, as said, can be really painful. So some of the operators, they decided to build everything from scratch. This does not need to be a bad solution, as you said. And even some of the current solutions and operators in the market, they started like this, but it also blocks much of your workforce capacity and distracts you from what really matters, right? And this is basically running your operations on a daily basis. And if we take that example from Cityscoot, 4,000 mopeds a day, multiple rides, let's say 5 rides per moped per day, and so on, this is quite substantial. Better focus on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Shout out to Amanda. Thank you for answering a bunch of the questions from Invers for us here as they're going by and then flying by in the chat. Enrico, I want to touch a little bit on like, what if you get locked into a situation where you're not flexible and you can't actually do the new thing that you think is going to make money? Like, how do you go about changing your tech stack? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, I think most people think that this is like almost never happening, right? So you start with your solution, then you stick with the solution because like never change a running system and you're simply afraid of it. But I think, yes, operators can and will change the tech stack solution. There are very many examples for that, not only in moped sharing, but in shared mobility in general. So that's happening. That's one thing. But it's not only possible, but I think my stand on this, it's also recommended and desired under certain circumstances, right? So without naming the operators, there have been even very large operators which changed their tech. The entire stack, new fleet management system, new white label customer app, new IoT. They did it not despite being a large operator with millions of rides, as said, but because of it, because they were successful and their demand was basically shifting. But Chris, maybe I should give back the question to you. Okay. You're working for a supplier here. What new features will like the tech stack providers need to integrate in future? Like what's coming up for you guys?
Love it. Yeah. So what I think this question really revolves around what cities are doing and how regulations are working, because you're going to have to balance all of the changes that are coming up with, like if the city says, okay, here's your maximum speed for safety because we've done the work and we found out that as long as you're under here, you're good. Or does putting pedals on a moped make it an e-bike and now it's safe enough that you can go on a bike lane? Like where are these numbers? And because, I mean, Europe's obviously ahead of the curve in this, but with North America, all the cities that I talk to and projects going in, they very much are still learning. Everybody's doing pilots. Let's let X number of users into the city and X number of mopeds, or kick scooters was a really good example for that too. And let's run a pilot and see what the safety is, see how many injuries are created from cars or not, and then change the regulations. So I think what's really happening going forward is manufacturers and operators and the city are in this triangle where they're working together and moving the goalposts constantly. So what is this example? What does this look like? Cities are they're doing this moving target. They're going to be changing maximum speeds. They're doing noise pollution is one, and this is a great example we had. Is you're going to have to adapt the IoT to be able to provide new data. Like if it has noise pollution, does your IoT, does your vehicle actually test for noise or not? We have a great example with Tier out of Berlin, and they actually had some of their users were riding on the sidewalks. And so they put in a noise microphone so they could test that, see what the noise were, detect the sound vibrations that said this person's on the sidewalk, and then blast out a bit of an alarm to alert pedestrians. And this is a thing that nobody saw that coming, but there's an adaptation that you can put in there, right? Another example is how does anonymous data capture and safety all kind of run in? For example, think about, say, Revel. Revel had to take their helmet selfie, which I think everybody knows about, so that, and
that's a big example.
Yeah, right, and that reduced the number of accidents by 50%. Tier did a very similar thing with incentivized training courses. Joel, I saw you point out that training is maybe so-so, and if you're riding a motorcycle, you can't test a training course to make somebody smart. True, but how do you balance it now? Like, how do all these things change? And what's bottom line? What is the city going to regulate that is going to restrict you from operating if you don't have it? So another like huge disruptor, e-bikes. E-bikes are up like 140%. I saw something about like in Berlin and Netherlands, they've topped non-e-bike things. You probably have a ton of numbers on this. You want to?
Yeah, that's really big here in Germany. That's a very good example. I don't know. Last year, e-bikes profited really strongly from the pandemic. Sales skyrocketed. We're up by 50% year on year. More and more operators are also like including these bikes now into sharing fleets. So yeah, totally. This is a big trend. Also like in different niches, like for example, subscription services, swap feeds, and there's so many good examples. They're just going through the roof.
Yeah, absolutely. Another one, parking. Parking is going to be huge. Like obviously, cities are changing everything. They're trying to reduce how much car space. Really excited to see less car parks that take up like entire like building blocks. And what we can do with that, like how is the charging going to work? How is the parking going to work? Can we put it together? Can you get new information from the charging station? I'm going to throw this back to Swift Mile and Commute. Like you guys probably have a ton of great answers for how this works. But again, that's something that now the software stack is going to have to integrate with to do it. So these are all just changes that are coming up. I'm gonna leave you on charging infrastructure and kind of pass it back to you. Yeah. But just to start, because we've seen it so much. There's so many new things. Like there's a big report came out tracking the life of an EV, so you can adjust what the resale value is, right? Like the lithium or cobalt, how we're making it. Can we make it longer? We got million-mile batteries, fantastic. But like I saw yesterday, Google just released a new routing algorithm that picks your route with recharging stations based on the type of charger you need. So are chargers now going to be, are you going to have a charger that's a specific type? Is it going to be agnostic to everybody? I hope so. Where does that go? But keeping your vehicles charged is a huge operational nightmare. So right in the middle of that changing drastically. So maybe about, if you want to talk about the batteries or maybe just the operational trends that you've seen, maybe you can kind of take that.
Yeah. I think that's a pretty good example for that. I think talking about charging and the tech stack requirements, this is really big at the moment, will stay big for at least a couple of years now and has been actually for quite some time. The trends I'm seeing here at the moment are basically user-based swapping. That's a big thing. Standardization, and then optimizing the entire operations around it, no matter which solution you're choosing. Let's start off with the user-based swapping. So we've seen that quite big and like pretty defining in Taiwan. GoShare, for example, around Gogoro, the vehicle manufacturer, they have like put out hundreds and thousands of battery kiosks on public grounds. And this is working pretty well, not only for shared mobility, but also vehicle ownership. It's an entire system implemented. But obviously it works easier on an island, which is like 100 kilometers long, and it's a pretty defined space, right? It's a little bit more complex if we're talking about Europe or the US. Another good example, as said, is standardization. And all these points go hand in hand. It's not a winner-takes-it-all thing, right? They go hand in hand. Standardization, I think it's about talking about the battery. OEMs, for example, they're more standardizing their solution stacks. And if you're asking me, I don't think it makes sense for every operator and vehicle manufacturer to build your own infrastructure for battery swaps, right? So I doubt that this is the perfect solution. Therefore, there's large potential in cooperation, and some of the OEMs are doing so. And then finally, I think that's basically the easiest thing to do at the moment. Optimizing your existing battery swapping solutions. How it looks right now in moped sharing is the employees, the staff is basically going to the moped and switching the battery, as it is done nowadays also with kick scooter sharing. This is like the status quo, and this is like a pain also like on the big cost block. And that's why optimizing this with data-driven solutions, there's a whole industry built right now around it. There's so many new startups talking about this kind of stuff. There's Ubik AI, there's Soba, so many people talking about these optimization efforts. And I think these are a couple of the trends which will go hand in hand.
Nice. So I mean, what you're saying there is like all these optimization, again, kind of global. So how about let's again focus back into North America and say like, well, what operational changes or changes in general need to happen to overcome North Americans being like I'll give you one quick example. Revel actually just pulled out of Austin, Texas, because they're a very car-based society. They just weren't getting the usership, and they're like, okay, well, you don't want to use mopeds, we won't. So maybe as one example, and I'm sure you have a couple others. Yeah, why North America?
I want to see more operators, definitely. That's the number one fact I want to see in North America. I think the potential there, it's a great market. But there's a very good reason for doing so. I think what we need at the moment in North America is the proof of market, the proof of demand. This just happened on Wednesday to some degree with Lime joining Revel actually in the market. So this is a very good and very positive sign. So it's happening. I think what's going to happen, and what's also happening already to some degree, make sure that you as an operator cooperate with the city. Micromobility companies, they're transportation companies. Integration, as said earlier, is really key. We have to build a strong alternative to simply vehicle ownership. I think that really matters, so cities matter. And then finally, one very important step to achieve that, maybe I'm biased here being European, but transit needs to become more attractive. shared mobility is not a standalone solution. I said that earlier. The biggest advantage lies actually in the system of mobility alternatives to pure vehicle ownership. So to put it really simple, to win the shared mobility game, that means also to invest in transit. And the recent US stimulus package for transit is a good sign for shared mobility. So Chris, I'm saying I'm rather positive for the coming 2 years actually in the US, and maybe we can have a bet, which is the first Canadian city to see moped sharing in 2021, 2022.
Oh man, that's a good question. I mean, it's probably going to be down to Vancouver or Toronto, honestly, maybe Montreal, but I don't know. What do you want to choose?
I'd go for Toronto. I know you're from Vancouver, so
okay.
Make it a little
okay.
bit.
I'll take Vancouver, and if we win, then you owe me a beer in Vancouver, and otherwise, I like it.
Deal.
Yeah, so that's fantastic. And one thing that I think is really key to how this all sharing works is different types of modes. Like Wayne Ting from Ling loved the way he put it. He said, everybody buys a car because it handles all of the modes. And if you're only gonna get one thing, it needs to be a car to do everything. But if you're doing a sharing solution, maybe you've got a kick scooter down to the downtown or something like that, but you want groceries, you need a moped now because you need to store it. Taking everybody to the family barbecue or something, you need a car, right? But you can choose which one's which. And I think the real key takeaway for why mopeds is they fill a gap between kick scooters and cars. It's super
Exactly.
useful. And I think to put a number to that, I know that Daniela Henry from Revel was suggesting that it's somewhere in the 3 to 4 miles range is when they really start picking up. Before that, it's kick scooters. After that, you start pushing into bikes and cars. Is that kind of what you would say for picking out where they're all used in shared mobility?
Nothing to add. I think that's exactly the layout for the coming weeks, for the coming month, and this is where we're heading.
Perfect. And we're out of time, which is, man, insane. I want to thank everybody for putting all of the questions in there. Like I said, we will get to the blog, and both Enrico and I are going to go hang out in the Invers booth. So hit the expo button and please come hang out.